time to get deep inside the trenches here. Offensive tackles, there's probably going to be at least, 6, maybe 7 offensive tackles that get drafted in round 1. Will also include a day 2 sleeper. Fran Duffy is here. He has rankings, full scouting reports. He's obviously obsessed with the Eagles, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because today, as I was preparing for my offensive tackles, I like to go look at some coaching clinics. There's a really cool one from Jeff Stoutland that's you have to pay for it. And then I came across you interviewing Jeff Stoutland a couple different times, just talking about some of the mechanics, traits that they're looking for. So just curious, Jeff Stoutland considered the best offensive line coach pretty much ever. What have you learned from Jeff Stoutland? Just what should we be looking for with these offensive tackles?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Coach Stout is, the unusual traits, right? And you think about, obviously, the Eagles have always consistently had one of the best offensive lines in football, and he's a big reason for that. It wasn't all just high round draft picks. While they did invest in the position, being able to get the most out of a physical freak like Jordan Mailata in the 7th round, and just there was a stretch there. I mean, he got hired in 2013 with Chip Kelly, and obviously just left this offseason. So you've got a really good sample size. And it was a couple of years ago, he said, like, every offensive lineman that the Eagles drafted during Jeff Stoutland's tenure is still in the NFL. And we're talking like, it was like a decade. And to have that kind of a hit rate, they weren't all pros, but to have them all stick, I mean, the proof is in the pudding there. So, the big thing with him was some kind of unusual trait, a unique trait about them, whether it was, like super undersized, like Jason Kelsey, but had unique athleticism, or crazy size in Matt Pryor, right? Like, obviously you get into like guys like Lane Johnson, who you may remember, like that draft in 2013, 3 of the first 4 picks were offensive tackles. Lane was the 3rd of the 4. Stoutland had him ranked ahead of the other guys that went ahead of him in Eric Fisher and Luke Jokel. Obviously Lane has turned into Hall of Fame player. So I think when you look at that, I would say that it kind of starts there. And look, Stoutland, one of the things that made him special during his time in Philly was like, you had the schematics, you had the coaching, you had the connectivity with the players, right? Like being able to, be personable and, have that relationship building aspect to you. But then also like the player evaluation process, like he just checked all of those boxes. These are all areas where coaches can really make their impact on an organization. And he was able to check all of those boxes, like a 5-tool player in baseball scouting. Like that's what Jeff Stoutland was as a position coach.
Some things that I picked up just listening to him is I didn't realize how much time is spent just working on combination blocks and getting the exact timing right. Like it's it's a full-blown obsession. And then something also that he said was that just college players, their hand striking timing, and then there's a ability to like pick up stunts and all that type of stuff. He just like says it's like usually just never good enough. So what I was kind of taking away from that is the athletic traits to me are what really needs to be polished. And he kept talking about like firing out of his stance and pass protection, kind of getting settled early and then having more control. So that's something that I was just kept going back to after listening to him. So go find those videos. They're really cool. So let's go over and do it this way. I got the consensus offensive tackle rankings according to your guys' opinions over on underdogmockdraft.com. Right now, at 5.3 average draft position, it's Francis Mauigoa, the right tackle from Miami. What's a scouting report on him? And do you think he's going to be a guard or a right tackle in the NFL?
Yeah, I do feel comfortable with him being an offensive tackle, being a right tackle. And he has only really been a right tackle during the course of his college career. Played some left tackle back in high school, but obviously, we're a little bit removed from that. So I do think that it's probably safe to project him solely as a right tackle. I am not of the opinion of, right tackle is less valuable than left tackle. I think that is an antiquated thought process in today's league. So for me, perfectly fine. Right tackle, I think he can hold up there and be a good starter. Do I think that he is Penei Sewell? Do I think that he is Tristan Wirfs? Do I think that he's one of the – I don't think he's that caliber of player, but there just aren't that caliber of player regardless of position in this class. So, I look at Francis Mauigoa, and to me, he is my tackle 3. But when I look at this group, they are all like so clustered together that I am perfectly fine with saying, if you want to tell me that you want to take him ahead of Fano, ahead of Proctor, ahead of that rest of that group, I'm perfectly fine. He's got a strong anchor. He's a solid athlete across the board. He's very skilled with his hands. I think that when you compare him to most college linemen, he is one of the more skilled players. He had the benefit of working under a really good college offensive line coach in Alex Mirabal down there at Miami. And I think when you're looking at like his physicality, his violence, he definitely moves the needle in that respect. I think there are some things in the run game that he can continue to clean clean up. And like I said, he's not like a special like needle moving physical talent, but I think that more than checks the box there. I feel really good about the player overall.
Yeah, he just built like a square, super strong. I wrote in my notes, he's a walking anchor. You don't have to worry about that. I think that he can move DNs one-on-one in the ground game. I think the only thing I'm questioning with him is just his range in pass protection. It's not that he's a bad athlete. He's just not an exceptional athlete. He's got enough arm length over the 33-inch mark. The numbers that he had this last year were phenomenal. I think there was a couple times where he'd get beat inside, where I'm not sure if his recovery ability is like that of obviously like the Lane Johnsons of the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at guard. I think that he's a fail to guard, and usually that doesn't happen very often. But I do think he proved himself enough to give him a chance at right tackle if he ends up as a really high level guard long term. I don't think teams should be sweating that. And there's some teams like the Giants could like start him at guard, and then when Iheanachor leaves, and he might kick out to right tackle. So I have him as a top 10 guy. He's my offensive tackle 3, like you have as well. Would you take him inside the top 10?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, I think that you probably, in a typical draft, I probably feel a little bit better about him. Like we'll say like 8 to 15, like somewhere in that. But in this draft, I think it's entirely possible he goes 3 with some of the late buzz and the whispers in the wind. It feels like, all right, that maybe Arvell Reese falls to 3, and then maybe the Cardinals take him instead. And, Mauigoa falls a little bit further. Obviously the medical recheck news that we got this week could also, cause a slide potentially. But I think all things considered, I feel comfortable with him in the top 12, in the top 10 in this class. So one of the guys I wrote down Talise Fuaga, who ended up being, I think was he the 11th pick, I believe, a couple years ago by the Saints out of Oregon State. And it was a similar kind of conversation with him where he was really skilled. He's powerful, maybe a better guard than tackle, and he's been perfectly fine at tackle. And that's kind of how I view Mauigoa.
Yeah, that's a fantastic comp. This should be the exact same player, really. Okay, next up on the consensus big board is Spencer Fano, and he's actually quite further down than Francis Mauigoa. Even though I have personally Spencer Fano ranked ahead, there's the same conversation. Is he a guard? Is he a tackle? It's for the opposite reasons as Francis Mauigoa. It's not about the range. It's about the power with Spencer Fano. So give us your scouting report.
Yeah, to me, he is my number 1 tackle in this group. And again, everybody's pretty close, so you can convince me in one way or the other. I think that there's some scheme stuff there where you can kind of nitpick and say like, all right, maybe he's a better fit for like lateral movement, like people would say like traditional like zone blocking type of scheme. Although I think both guys can kind of fit there. But I think with Fano, more natural athleticism, lateral movement, the more range. You talked about the range being the question with Mauigoa. I don't think that's the issue with Fano. He's extremely efficient as an athlete. Began his career at left tackle, moved over to right tackle because the staff there felt that Caleb Lomu was a left tackle only. And then they both came in the same recruiting class, except Lomu was a 265-pound high school athlete, so wasn't ready to play right away. And so they were like, all right, he's going to redshirt. We're going to put Fano in at left tackle. And then when Lomu's ready, since he's a left tackle only, just in terms of like his comfort, we'll put him in at left and we'll bump Fano over. So he's got left tackle flexibility. He also, and you mentioned, I think some people feel like he might be better served inside. Man, people have been talking about center because he snapped after his combine workout. To me, like that is a big projection, and it's not just like, oh yeah, can he snap? But there's so much that goes into like the mental side of playing center that I'm not just easily saying, oh yeah, like he's going to be a center. I think that is a big projection in terms of like making the calls and all of those things. So to me, I look at Fano. I am perfectly fine with him being a tackle right now. We'll say I would let him fail there. I talk about the athleticism. He's stronger than given credit for, but I do agree with you that it's not like power, like moving guys at the point of attack in the run game. Like that's not necessarily his bag. That said, like he's very technically sound in the run game. I think his hands, his hips, his pads, everything looks really, really good. He's very useful on the move in terms of like pulls and out in space, like screen game. I think he can be a weapon. I think the toughness and running his feet on contact, all of that is there. I know our friend Brandon Thorne, he made the comparison like Zach Tom, which I was like, oh, I kind of like that, who has been a longtime starter at right tackle for the Green Bay Packers. Now, Tom was a 4th round pick, and I do think that speaks to some of the limitations we see from a size standpoint with Spencer Fano, but I just really like the player. And if you do think he's a guard, you think he's a tackle, no matter, whatever it is, he's a good player that I want on my team.
I think he's the best athlete of the bunch, especially on tape. I thought his range was just phenomenal. And he's got really good recovery skills on inside counter moves. But according to PFF, one 0.2% loss rate on outside moves in 2025. You just really can't beat him to the perimeter. Now, the Utah offense kind of helps him out. There's lots of tight ends and running backs on both sides, and you definitely saw that in the Texas Tech game. He got beat on an inside move, spin move by I think it was David Bailey on that one. But for the most part, he handled that game, I thought, really well. I think you can move him out in space in the run game. I think he's really pound for pound strong. There's sometimes maybe where gets hit and he doesn't have enough like mass and kind of gets off balance if he's not expecting contact. But I think he's pound for pound strong, and he's one of these guys. He's only 21 years old. He's going to get a little bit stronger in the NFL too. So to me, if you're worried about his anchor and his strength and stuff, I think moving inside, like, you're still going to be dealing with that. I would rather keep him out at tackle and then use his blessed traits moving laterally and out of his stance. I think that he's a phenomenal player. Maybe a comp, kind of out of the box comp. Rashawn Slater was this at left tackle. What obviously like not a huge player there, but just a really, really gifted athlete. And I can see the same thing with Spencer Fano on the right side. So if I was the Cardinals, I would think I would be leaning towards Spencer Fano. Depends on who's there in the edge rusher department and what their grade is on Arvell Reese. But I think that Spencer Fano is the best non-Fernando Mendoza offensive player in the draft.
I like that. Yeah. To me, I feel really good. Like, he gives me like, comfort food, like kind of feeling where I'm just like, yeah, I just feel really good. If I take him, like, I'm sleeping well that Thursday night in the draft.
Yeah. I think the worst case, like Elijah Vera Tucker was this, then kicks inside. And then when he was healthy, he was absolutely balling out there too. So there were a lot of really high end comps we're throwing out here. Monroe Freeling's actually the offensive tackle 3 in the consensus big board right now. I think a lot of mock drafters are throwing him up with the Cleveland Browns. And if not them, it's the Detroit Lions. So I think he's going to go somewhere in the teens, late riser. I watched all of his snaps from this last season. You can see the progression as the season continues. So what's the scouting report on Monroe Freeling?
Yeah, only a 1-year starter at left tackle. So, a limited sample size that we're dealing with. A very young player. He'll be 22 years old when the season opens. True junior, like I mentioned. But to me, like, this is a dancing bear tackle, really light feet, explosive athlete. I do think the combine kind of perfectly encapsulated him as a prospect for me, like where he goes and the athletic testing was phenomenal and the position workout, like the field work, was extremely messy. Got tossed out of a drill to redo, fell on the ground a couple times, just not super detailed. And it's like, yeah, like this kind of encapsulates, it's a small sample. I'm not saying like don't draft him off this, but it kind of crystallizes what we're looking at here, where he's an outstanding physical specimen, all the traits to develop into like that true traditional left tackle, which we don't have that necessarily in this class, right? And I think that's what gets people excited. But because of the small runway of experience and because of the, again, like the refinement that's needed across the board, you might have to, patience is going to be required. And I think that when you look at them just from a technique standpoint as well, I think that most shows up in pass protection. And especially like early on in the season, you saw the rawness there. So with patience, I compared him to like a Brian O'Neill type of player who he ended up being a day 2 pick out of Pitt and has turned into a longtime starter for the Vikings as a right tackle. I think Freeling, he's only played left tackle, but again, he's played some right tackle early in his career. So he's got that position flexibility in that way. I do think that's important for him early on, but to me, I'm good with taking this bet. He is my tackle 4, but to me, like, he's on that same tier, just a lower grade than the rest of those players.
We see this one pretty similar. I have him as my offensive tackle 2, though, because I'm willing to just, even if it takes a couple years, like the long-term investment of having a left tackle is so valuable. It's impossible to find these guys on the open market. If you are going to get them on the open market, it's like typically via trade, and you're going to have to send over lots of first rounders and pay them like the Larry Mutunsels and Trent Richardsons and all those types. So you can land one of these guys in the draft. I think you got to do it. 35-inch arms, pretty much 91st percentile 40, 93rd percentile in the jumps. His outside loss rate is at 6%, which I just said with Fano's at 1%. So there is a difference in the technique, definitely. But from week 8 on, that dropped to under 3%. And I thought a lot of his issues actually in the later half of the season was just like being a little bit late on kind of like the stunts and loops and blitzers and stuff. And I thought he was making more mental mistakes than he was making physical mistakes later on in the season. I think that's something that as he gets more experience, that'll get cleaned up. And I just thought by the end of the season, his one-on-one reps in pass protection were actually being pretty good. Now he's like really tall, so sometimes he gets a little bit too tall in as a run blocker, but he's also really strong. I wouldn't be surprised if he adds another 5-10 pounds as he gets into the NFL. So yeah, to me, I would very much consider this if I was the Browns. Maybe not at 6, but trading back up somewhere in that range. I would be pretty surprised if he falls outside the top 20, just because like the potential here is like just so obvious with him.
Yeah, I think like we talk about this draft class as being kind of devoid of the blue chip talent, and I think that's absolutely fair. I do think in any draft, Monroe Freeling's a first round pick. Like that's a profile that you were going to bet on more often than not.
Okay, another one, Kadyn Proctor. He's the offensive tackle 4, according to consensus rankings here, left tackle at Alabama. Him and Francis Mauigoa were the top prospects or recruits coming out of high school, 5-star guys. They look the part. The best of Kadyn Proctor is sensational. There was a lot of bad. What are we supposed to do with Alabama left tackle here?
Yeah, I have him as my tackle 2. And again, those 3 guys are all really, really close. So you can swing me on the order. But I think when you're looking at Proctor, the good is outstanding. And I am taking the full body of work into consideration here, just watching him as a sophomore over the summer as well, where he played the majority of the season with a torn labrum and then ended up getting surgery as soon as the season ended and missed the bowl game because of it, but played most of the season with that bum shoulder. And you just saw him dominating in the SEC as a 19-year-old. And so when I look at Proctor, power personified, he moves people off the ball at will, excellent play strength. You're not uprooting him. You're not going through him as a bull rusher. I talk about the power in the run game. To me, like, you look at his size, and the big question, for him, and I think that has led to a lot of the inconsistencies, was the fact that he came into the season severely overweight. And, when you come in and you're close to 4 bills to start the season, and then you get into the game shape and you saw the tape start to turn, I think that that's what you're kind of looking at here. Now, if you're a scout, you're an evaluator, you're a team, you are asking the question, all right, why were you overweight? And what's the reasoning behind that? Is that a symptom of like poor football character and like taking care of your body, or is that because we've seen guys like that where it's like, yeah, he's not a bad kid. He's just, you got to stay on top of him from a weight standpoint. I'm here in Philly, and Jordan Davis was similar to this coming out, and once you get that under control, he turns into a really dominant player at what he's asked to do. So when I look at Proctor, that's kind of where I've landed with him, where it's like, okay, like this is not like we've seen players that come out. I've been basket cases along the offensive line where it's like, yeah, like I don't know if I can fully trust him, but the ceiling is really high. I don't think that's the case with Proctor. I do think that this is a guy that you can absolutely work with. Started right away for Nick Saban in his final year. And to me, like the size, the traits, I mean, he goes to the combine. He goes 110 inches in the broad, 29 and a half in the vert, which you would look at that in like raw numbers, that's like above average, but for 350 pounds. And to me, like when I weight adjust that's a crazy. Better number. Those are better numbers than any tackle drafted in the last 10 years. And when I'm looking at like, who are the other guys in that mold, like Tristan Wirfs is up there, Jordan Mailata is up there, Darnell Wright's up there, Armand Membu's up there. Like it's a lot of like the top, like Amarius Mims, like some of the most physically gifted offensive tackles in football. And so when I look at Proctor, like that's the ceiling. And it's kind of like what you were talking about with Monroe Freeling, where it's, at some point, like that bet is worth taking. I think Proctor's going to end up going earlier than what is currently projected.
Yeah, I think he's going to go inside the top 20. We see this one the exact same way. I was very scared of Kadyn Proctor early on, just based off the tape, because he was getting beat inside, outside, and then even sometimes in the bull rush, like all of a sudden, like, he was just kind of getting thrown off. And I think that he was just so out of shape that he just wasn't playing within balance. But I thought it was such a big deal that he goes up to the combines at 352. I was like, this is like one of the biggest winners of all of the combine, because if he was at 380 something, everyone's gonna be like, I'm not gonna draft this guy in round 1. I don't trust him. Him showing up at 330, 352 was a big deal. The tape was just like straight up pretty bad. But you can see him pop out of his stance with that explosiveness that Stoutland would be talking about. And then he's super powerful as a run blocker. And he's also only 20 years old. So you can see the 5-star traits with him immediately. He just got beat so many times this last year that you're really going to have to like get down to the bottom of what the hell was going on. Played in a couple different systems over there as well. But man, he just got the stuff that you can't really teach. And if you want that at a premium position like this, you got to get these guys early. So there's a lot of buzz right now with the Lions at 17. I can see the Panthers getting involved. Do you think that he has a chance to kick in either to right tackle? He's kind of got like classic right tackle build to him. I'm not sure if he has to play right tackle in the pros or perhaps at guard. I think he can handle any of those But I do think that I would probably just keep him at left tackle, most likely.
Yeah, me personally, again, I think that left tackle, right tackle is interchangeable. He is the more like the traditional right tackle skill set. But to me, like I'm perfectly fine. Let's leave him at left tackle. I do think that you can say, and again, I think a lot of the stuff early on, a lot of those issues that you pointed to that you saw in pass protection, I think a lot of that can be explained away with the weight, right? And it's like, and you mentioned like even the plays where he did get uprooted, a lot of it was like he is stressing so far to get to the corner to protect against speed, and good rushers in the SEC, went speed to power. And when you have that poor base, like you're going to get uprooted, but even by a smaller defender. We see that all the time. So I think when you're looking at that, like some of that, if you feel like that's what you're getting, like that version, then like that's going to get mitigated by sliding him inside, and he's not going to be stressed with as much speed when he's playing there on the interior. So you can convince me like he can be an all-pro guard, and if that's how you view him and you want to plug him in there, I think that's fine. But I do think that, and obviously we know like tackle's more valuable, and I think he can play that spot. I compared him to Leonard Davis. I don't know if you remember Leonard Davis when he was at Arizona playing for the Cardinals for years. Like he was the number 2 pick in the draft that year when he came out, and was just a similar kind of physical marvel. And I look at this player the same way in Proctor.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, he's just a big riser to me. The more I thought about this, I'm like, you know what? Like these guys just don't come around this often. We got to get involved here. All right, I would say it's kind of a step down from here personally. In the consensus rankings, it's Caleb Lomu next. Caleb Lomu and Blake Miller are pretty close to each other, but left tackle out of Utah, Caleb Lomu. What did you see on tape?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a pretty short runway of starting experience, only 2 years. So, redshirt sophomore. So 24 starts at tackle. That is certainly like beneath what you would typically want, ideally. But look, he's got dancing bear traits. He's a great athlete, explosive qualities, light on his feet, easily can run the hoop versus NFL speed. Like that's the skill set here. And to me, when I'm watching him, we've seen guys like Colton Miller come into the league with that skill set where he's really athletic, but the anchor is a big question. He's not a power guy. Like, so the play strength is a big concern. He came in at 313 at the combine. I think really pushed hard to be able to get to that number, probably played closer, certainly to 300 pounds, which is very light for an NFL tackle. So over time, can he get bigger? Can he get stronger? I think that's fine. Like we can expect that, but it's a big projection for me. And so I am a little bit lower on Lomu at this point. I think when you're looking at him, like Bernard Raymond was a guy I wrote down, and Raymond was inexperienced for different reasons, just coming from the international pathway. But I think when you're looking at Lomu, I do think that it's going to take some time and patience to get there. He certainly can be a starter, but it's a bet you got to make.
We have the same exact comp. We have the same exact profile. I had Bernard Raymond as my number 1 comp. I love him moving out in space, and then I still think that he would just get pushed around. I was watching the 2024 tape before recording today, and there was a kid from Southern Utah who looks like, a podcaster, and he just uprooted him, man. I was like, what is this? So yeah, I just had the same things. Like when he loses like how Will Campbell loses. Now he doesn't have the exact same build as Will Campbell, but I think they're both kind of finessey players. And I just think it's going to take a little bit of time now. Like he's going to have to start right away because he's going to go round 1. I have more like a round 1-2 turn type of player. I liked his athletic traits. There's some times where I think he would bend from the waist a little bit too much and you get a little bit overextended, especially watching him versus Fano. If you like freeze frame the tapes, you can see Spencer Fano just like in such a great stance, and sometimes Caleb Lomu can kind of get a little waist bendy to me, but for the most part, you're betting on his size, the length, and then the athletic traits more so than the anchor, which makes me a little bit nervous if I have to admit.
Yeah, to me, like I get the people that really, really like him, because you don't have to really squint that hard to see what he could be down the road, but down the road is what's carrying a lot of the weight there. And I just think it will take time, and there's some projection there that makes it a volatile projection.
Okay. Do you have a round 1-ish grade on him, or is this more of day 2 guy?
I think at the end of the day, because of the position and like the scarcity there, I do think he's going to he'll be a round 1 guy. But again, the way I personally like my grading scale, like I don't go round grades, I go like projected role. And so I have developmental starter because I do think it's going to take some time and seasoning there. So he's my 43rd player just because in terms of like where he drops. But again, like I would take him in the first round. I think that's a profile you take early.
Okay, interesting. All right, Blake Miller, right tackle out of Clemson. I think actually stylistically not all that dissimilar to Caleb Lomu. I think that there is some power problems with Blake Miller, but once again, lit up the combine. Unlike Caleb Lomu, this guy has played a million snaps.
Yes.
I think it was the Clemson record, almost 4,000 offensive snaps, 54 career starts at right tackle there. Really nice build for him, really long arms. What did the tape show you with Blake Miller?
Yeah, and here's the thing. I know he tested he tested well. Like the RAS is 994, but even like looking at, I'm like, all right, well, the numbers like on their head, even as a 317-pound athlete, like, didn't blow me away. And when I watch him on tape, I don't see like a high-end athlete. I thought he was like a solid athlete across the board. Going back to like the Jeff Stoutland thing, I didn't see any unusual or unique physical trait with him from an athleticism standpoint. I didn't see a power player, as you mentioned. I thought his anchor was solid, like dealing with ACC bull rushers. But again, like not enough where I would say like, oh, this sets him apart enough to be a starter. Whenever you talk to anybody about him, when you talk to like Southeast scouts, you talk to other people who talk to scouts, everybody that talks about Blake Miller, it's, man, he's a phenomenal kid, intangibles, extremely tough, flag carrier, captain, all that stuff, all the intangibles. That's great. But when we're talking about like ceiling and guys I want to draft in the first round, like I want something there to get excited about from an upside standpoint. And I just haven't seen that with Blake Miller. He's played a ton of ball. I have conversations with people who are like, oh, like, did you watch the bowl game? And I'm like, well, the guy's played 54 starts. Like you're telling me I got to watch his 54th start to get excited against Penn State? Like, man, like to me, I have struggled with him throughout the process. I see him as more of a backup tackle. Like I don't see a starting caliber player in the NFL. And I get like he's going to go in the first round. So if you go into like my diehard draft guide and you see like, all right, like my overall rating is in like the hundreds, something like that. But when it says like round projection, I've got 1-2 on it. I think he's going to end up going that high because that's where he's going to end up going. But I just have not seen that, when I watch him on tape. I struggled there.
Yeah, I think the combine caught me by surprise because like he's obviously a decent athlete, but there was some times where I say he's not exploding out of his stance. And then I think that his recovery speed was pretty adequate. What's interesting though is like, again, when he's anchoring, he can kind of drop his hips and stay in control pretty decent. I just thought he kind of got off balance when he was trying to move laterally a little bit too much. And the thing with him is he was like really aggressive in like his pass protection plan. Like he's going to flash out. He's going to throw hands at you quickly and try to get you off guard. So he's doing some of like the more veteran tricks already. And I still think there was some glimpses there where I can see either just a pure speed rusher can get around him, or to me, it's going to be like the inside counter moves where I was just kind of questioning his recovery speed. Like you said, though, like in the ground game, finisher, you can tell he's fired up. So you do appreciate that. I don't think that he was the strongest player in the ground game. So I don't think like him finishing in the 5th second of a play matters nearly as much as what you're doing in the 1st second of a run play. So I think he's probably going to go in like the round 1. I have him on that round 1-2 turn just because of the scarcity asset to him. I do think that he's going to be more of an average to low end starter, which I would still take at right tackle late round 1. So Abe Lucas, Roger Rosengarten played similarly. He went, I think, 3rd round, but he's been a good pick so far. I think stylistically, those guys are pretty similar.
Yeah, Rosengarten, like even he was kind of like Lomu, where it was like, all right, like really athletic, really lean. Maybe should have gone back for another year, but I had questions about the strength. And I believe he went 2nd round to Baltimore and was able to play quicker than I imagined. So like that's like one of those cases where I'm like, all right, with Lomu, I could see it. And that's where I didn't see that upside with Miller, and that's where I think I get hung up on him.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Arizona State, another developmental guy, Max Iheanachor. He just moves so differently than everybody else, in my opinion. He's built like a square, but I think that he can move his feet really well. He's got really quality arm length. On top of that, he's the kid that started playing football at JUCO and then ends up in the probably fringe rounds 1. So what did you see out of the right tackle from ASU?
Yeah. So I studied him back in the summer. And so based off his, the junior tape, off the 2024 tape. And I kind of like wrote the story in my head of like how this draft process was going to go for him. And it has panned out exactly how I thought, where it's like, all right, the senior tape is going to be volatile. You're going to see some ups. You're going to see some downs because this is like his 4th year actually playing the sport. He is such a freak. 6'5", 330 pounds. Like, so you were talking about a significantly bigger prospect than like Lomu and some of these other guys. but really light feet, really explosive, the lateral mobility, the ability to out in space. He's got strength, he's got power, like he's got all of these physical qualities, but he's extremely raw, and he's going to have, again, like there's volatility there on film where it's like, oh, like that was an ugly rep. This was an ugly rep. But I was like, all right, he's going to go to the senior. He's going to have up and down moments here as in his final year. He's going to go to the Senior Bowl. He's going to really pop down there. He's going to build buzz. Everyone's going to talk about a first-round pick. Then he's going to go to the Combine, look really good in Indy, and he's going to look good there. And it's like, yep, like rocket ship to the moon, and he's going to be a first-round pick. And that's kind of how I think it's going to plan out for him. I would be surprised if he fell to the second round, honestly. I just think that when you talk about offensive linemen with his upside, with his traits, those guys tend to go. And so, in a typical draft, I think you're probably talking like late 20s into the 30s. And I think that that's likely. But if you told me a team like at 19, 20, 21 took the swing there in this draft on that player, I absolutely could buy it just because of what the upside is. And there aren't a lot of players with that level of upside in this class.
Yeah, I thought his movement abilities were just better than even, the Caleb Lomu's in that type. Like, because he's just so strong. He can sink his hips. He can slide laterally. The problem with him right now is just he flashes his hands so late where sometimes he's just like exposing his chest and it kind of gets knocked back. But then he can kind of recover from there as well. Sometimes the pass set depth, I think gets a little bit wonky with him. So there's some technique issues. I don't think the technique issues are so overwhelming that this guy can't start as a rookie though. So like if we're going to do the same thing with Caleb Lomu as he like tries to get stronger, like I think that he's almost the exact same tier of player on the right side. So I have him ranked higher than the guys we just talked about. He'd be my offensive tackle 5. I think the ceiling is significantly higher than those last 2 guys that we talked about. And I don't think that he's that much further back than the other guys. His tape against Texas Tech was really good. And he was left on islands a lot more than the Utah guys against Texas Tech, and didn't win every single rep, like, nor should he. I thought he handled himself very well on top of that. So my question to you, Eagles at 23, I think this would be kind of close to like the range that we talk about. Like, could this be a guard and then kick over to Lane Johnson long-term here? I think that he could play guard for a season. I would rather him just like learn tackle, but I was curious if like Eagles Iheanachor, would that be crazy?
No, it's not crazy. I actually just did it. I was on a podcast this morning and was asked like, who are 3 options that you'd feel like, all right, on April 9th, like who do you like for the Eagles? And Iheanachor was one of the first names I mentioned. I do think that that's a guy that checks a lot of their boxes. You talk about like the unique physical traits and, qualities that can, that have that upside. That's where Howie Roseman has always, kind of trended towards those kinds of players. And then also, they've also been one of the higher rates in terms of general managers, like selecting guys from the Senior Bowl in early rounds. That's something that we've seen them really go that direction. So it typically is day 2, but even going back as far as like Brandon Graham was one of the stars of the Senior Bowl, ended up being a top 15 pick by the Eagles. So I do think Iheanachor like checks a lot of the boxes there. I do think he's probably a tackle only, and in an ideal world, like, hey, you've got Tyler Steen at right guard that you can get you through the year. Let Iheanachor continue to develop there at tackle.
Interesting. Just while we have you on the Eagles, like who else was on your list? Like, is like Jordan Tyson types or?
Yeah, Kenyon Sadiq. If he got there, I just did a new mock draft that just dropped over at all of our All City markets, and the Sadiq is a tricky one, man, because there are a bunch of teams between like 14 with Baltimore and like 21 where I'm like, that's a Sadiq team. That's a Sadiq team. That's a Sadiq team. So I think there are a bunch of spots there along the way that could lead to him going off the board. But I would say Sadiq, and we talked about Proctor is likely to go, but Proctor is absolutely their type as well. So maybe it might require like a short kind of trade up there, but those are the types of players I think that most match what you typically see from the Eagles.
All right. Last Eagles question. Odds AJ Brown gets traded. And if that's a high number, is that going to come after June 1st or before it?
I think it's at this point, I think it would have happened already if it was going to happen before June 1st. So the fact that it hasn't happened yet, I think it's probably like a June 2nd type of situation. I think it's more likely than not. Okay. I've held firm on that since the season ended. I just think that it's a lot here in Philly, and I think that's a lot of trying to wash away the negativity, but it's like, we all just watched the same season that we watched, right? Like, we all watched the same thing. It's pretty clear that it's that situation is kind of too far gone. I think they are trying to see if they can make it work, but it really does feel like, look, at owners meetings a couple weeks ago, Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, like, had all the opportunity in the world to say, like, AJ Brown is going to be an Eagle in 2026. He is on our team.
He is an Eagle.
Like, it's AJ Brown is an Eagle. And it's like, okay,
for how much longer, by the way?
We kind of see where that typically goes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so that's the top 7 offensive tackles. I think realistically, those are like the only 7 that I think have a chance to go in round 1.
Agree.
There's one kind of in no man's land out of Northwestern, Caleb Tiernan. What do you see out of him?
I'm glad you wanted to bring him up, man, because I do like him. And I to me, the way you described Blake Miller in terms of like the quality of player, like level of player, that's how I view Caleb Tiernan. Like, I think he could be a low level, like you can play with this guy as a starter and feel okay. Could he play? Would it be better for him to be a guard potentially? Like, I could absolutely see the Packers taking him in the 3rd round and he's a guard for them for 12 years. Like, I could absolutely see that with Caleb Tiernan. But just a really efficient player. You watched him in the Big Ten against some quality rushers that, guys that are in this class or guys that are going to be in next year's class. And I thought he fared well in all of those games. He's not going to blow you away with his like strength and power, but technically sound, efficient movement, can protect the corner. I liked him. To me, like, I think just an average, solid NFL starter, a guy that you can play with. And to me, like, I feel comfortable there. Like, in round 2, if you get him in the 3rd round, I think that's great value. But we saw like Ozzie Trapillo go in the 2nd round last year. Like, I have a higher grade on him than I had on Ozzie Trapillo. So I definitely feel like Caleb Tiernan is in that range of player.
Yeah, so right now he's 72nd on the consensus board. I have him a little bit ahead of that. Ozzie Trapillo is actually one of my comps for Caleb Tiernan, who kicked over at left tackle for the Bears this last year. He's got one of the funkiest profiles there is. He's got 94th percentile height, 4th percentile arm length. Right. So he's just one of these guys. There's a lot of these guys in this draft class with that problem.
The combine measurements throw everything out of whack in that way. Yes. You got to go to the pro day and the all-star games.
For sure. The vertical jump, though, 98th percentile, 35.5-inch vertical as a 6'8", 323 pound. That is one of the freakiest measurements that we were going to see out of Indy this last year. I thought that he can move more in a straight line, more so than like moving laterally. You kind of see that sometimes as like a 6'8" guy, but I thought he handled himself pretty dang well. Braden Smith's one of these offensive tackles with really short arms that's been able to get away with it. He might play guard for the Texans this year. So yeah, definitely a day 2 guy, but I do think we've seen some day 2 starting tackles in the last couple of years. I would not be surprised if he is the next in line there. Is there any other like sleepers that you have, either somebody that you ranked really high or like a Markel Bell, and just anybody that we need to know about at offensive tackle?
Yeah, honestly, I'll put these guys kind of a similar bucket in Markel Bell from Miami, 1-year starter at left tackle, obviously with Mauigoa at right tackle, but ginormous human being, just like so humongous. And so like, I don't know if you remember, you might, as a Chargers guy, King Dunlap. Dunlap was an Eagle first, then went out to LA. And to me, just a huge human being who's just tough to get around. Like he had that one rep that went viral in the very first one-on-one rep in the Senior Bowl, and then was just awesome after that down there. And I would put Demetrius Crownover from Texas A&M in a similar kind of bucket where just a huge human being, 6'7", 319 pounds, almost 36-inch arms. I wrote down Patrick Paul, and then you're talking about like a day 2 tackle that turned into a starter. Crownover, I think, is probably like a 3rd, 4th round pick. Bell, I would put kind of in that same realm. And with both guys, at the end of the day, like size is a pretty good trait to have at tackle, especially if you've got that length, that teams are looking for. So, we see players like Orlando Brown,
DeJuan Jones,
and, maybe we're a mid-round pick. Yeah, exactly right. And you just have that ability to just be able to stick and just be a solid player for a long, long time. And I would put Crownover and Bell in that same bucket.
Markel Bell, 6'9.25", 346 pounds, arm length. This is just this last Indianapolis run where everybody's too short. His arms 36.5 inches, man. I mean, this is a monster of a human. Yeah. Too big to fail. I would draft him in the 3rd round just to see what the hell's going on here.
Yeah, you mentioned DeJuan Jones. Like I wrote down, Orlando Brown, Zach Banner. We've seen Cornelius Lucas play in the league for like a decade plus. Where if you're that big and that long, there are so many. You're tough to get off the field. You're tough to get around. So I think those guys have staying power.
Okay, interesting. All right, we covered a lot of ground here. I think it'll probably be 6 of the 7 offensive tackles go round 1. These guys are going to fly off the board. They're very important. I think a lot of boom bust profiles in this one, but there is some ceilings to chase here. So Spencer Fano, we agreed, was offensive tackle 1, right?
Yep, I agree with
that. Okay. And then it's Kadyn Proctor versus Monroe Freeling, and then we both see Francis Mauigoa the same. So really interesting class. Lots of fun. Fran Duffy, you have scouting reports on a million of these guys. Please share where we can find those.
Yeah, so I've got the Die Hard Draft Guide. Go follow me on social media. I tweet out that link every chance I get. I've written up almost 300 players, and I've got almost 1,000 guys listed in that on that document. And it's strengths, weaknesses, projections, player comps, numbers that matter, all the background info. So I've had that thing public since early October. So you can if you subscribe now, it's $26 to subscribe if you just want the access to the draft info, and that covers you for a full year. So you can get ready all this 2027 class that we're all excited about. Like, subscribe now, and that'll get you ready for next year's class as well. I'll have that thing ready at the end of the summer.
My favorite thing that you do with all of the prospects is you get away from consensus and you say exactly how you feel, and you do such a good job of actually showing what the NFL views this type of player and try to matching those guys. So I think that's the way to handle just positional value, but also just putting these guys in the right buckets. And you'll see some wild rankings from Fran Duffy. We need those rankings because sometimes Fran Duffy hits it right on the head when everyone else is too scared to compete. So really appreciate that you did that. Appreciate for the time. We'll be back later on this week. I think we're going to get edge rusher rankings on the channel as well. So not just the fantasy football positions. Yep. We're in the trenches as well. So subscribe, all the type of stuff. UnderdogMockDraft.com, by the way. Please go over there. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.